The Helior war chamber rang with laughter as holographic stars drifted above polished black stone, each glowing marker representing a conquered world. Galactic commanders stood in towering ranks, their armor etched with victories earned over centuries of unchallenged dominance. Before them hovered the final projection from the Orion line, showing Earth's remaining ships pulling away in disordered retreat. Engines flared weakly, hulls burned, formations shattered. To the Helior Empire, it was the familiar image of a species finally learning its place. Commander Vraxil leaned forward, his voice heavy with contempt. Humans had spoken of unity, of freedom, of refusing to bow, yet now they fled just like the rest. He watched the image loop again, savoring the moment, convinced this retreat marked the end of meaningful resistance. Orders were already being prepared for occupation fleets, resource claims, and population control. Earth, like so many before it, would be catalogued and pacified. Yet amid the celebration, an aide hesitated, claws tightening around a data slate. A single signal flickered at the edge of the tactical display, weak but persistent, originating from the debris-choked remains of the Orion line. Vraxil dismissed it at first, assuming a delayed transmission or a dying distress call. Still, something about the signal refused to vanish, pulsing steadily as if waiting to be acknowledged. Reluctantly, the commanders turned their attention back to the display. The image sharpened, revealing one small human vessel, drifting forward from the wreckage. Its hull was scorched nearly black, scarred by weapons fire and patched with mismatched plating. There were no escorts, no defensive screen, and no recognizable fleet insignia. By all strategic logic, the ship should not have been operational, let alone advancing alone toward an Imperial armada. Murmurs spread through the chamber, curiosity mixing with renewed mockery. Vraxil authorized a scan, expecting confirmation of irrelevance. The results, however, unsettled even the most seasoned officers. The ship carried minimal shielding, unstable reactor output, and weapon systems so old they bordered on obsolete. It was not a threat. It was a relic. As the vessel continued its slow approach, the signal resolved into an open broadcast. Static cracked, then cleared, revealing a human voice calm enough to feel deliberate. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the Terran vessel Last Light," it said. The name meant nothing to the Helior command, and several commanders laughed again, interpreting the announcement as a final plea for acknowledgement before destruction. Ward's tone never wavered. He spoke without urgency, as though time itself had chosen to pause and listen. He addressed the retreat directly, stating that the humans' withdrawal was not born of fear or surrender, but of necessity. Each word carried the weight of someone who understood exactly what was being lost and why. Inside the small ship, Ward sat alone at the controls, the dim cockpit lit by failing panels and distant starlight. His face bore the exhaustion of years of war, and the quiet resolve of someone who had already accepted the cost of his choice. He had watched Earth burn, watched civilians flee under alien fire, and signed orders that sent others away while he remained. Retreat had been required so survival could be possible, but survival still demanded someone to stay. The Helior commanders listened despite themselves, irritation giving way to an unfamiliar tension. Ward spoke of responsibility rather than glory, of holding the line not to win but to buy time for others. The lone ship advanced another fraction closer, engines straining, as if defying the inevitability everyone else could see. Vraxil finally ordered weapons to target the vessel, confident the spectacle would end quickly. Yet as firing solutions formed, archival systems activated without command, cross-referencing old encounters, rare engagements where human forces had refused annihilation through unconventional means. A single designation surfaced beside the Terran ship's fading signal, marked with a level of threat the Empire reserved for disasters rather than enemies. The chamber grew silent as the human voice spoke one final time in this exchange, naming a call sign that carried history, sacrifice, and intent far beyond the fragile hull bearing it. In that moment, the laughter died, replaced by the uneasy understanding that Earth's retreat had not been the end of the war, but the beginning of something far more dangerous. Warning glyphs began to glow across the war chamber, unnoticed by those staring at the lone ship. Power fluctuations rippled through Helior targeting arrays, minor at first, then persistent. Vraxil felt a tightening he did not name, an instinct long dulled by victory. The human vessel did not slow, did not plead, and did not turn away. It simply advanced, carrying with it the certainty that some decisions, once made, could no longer be undone. The next moments promised consequences none of them had prepared to face alone. Elias Ward felt the vibration before the warning lights ignited, a deep shudder traveling through the last light as enemy targeting. Systems finally resolved his position. He welcomed it because certainty was easier to face than waiting. Outside the cockpit canopy, Helior warships shifted formation, their elegant lines turning, predatory as weapons arrays aligned. On his small vessel, they still believed this was a spectacle, a final human gesture meant to be observed and erased. Ward adjusted the cracked harness across his chest and exhaled slowly. He thought of the pilots who had followed his retreat order without argument, trusting him with their lives and with Earth's future. That trust was heavier than fear, heavier than the gravity well forming ahead of him. Retreat had been his command, but staying behind had been his choice. When he had made the moment he realized survival demanded a price, the Helior commander spoke again over the open channel, their voices edged with irritation and disbelief. They demanded surrender, offering the empty mercy of captivity in exchange for compliance. Ward listened without anger, hearing only the certainty of an empire that had never been forced to doubt itself. When he replied, his voice carried no defiance, only clarity. He told them surrender was impossible, not because he expected to win, but because his purpose had already been fulfilled. Within the ship's core, containment fields strained as Ward rerouted power manually. He moved with practiced efficiency, ignoring alarms that screamed of cascading failure. Every system he touched reminded him of the engineers who had kept this ship flying long past its intended lifespan. The last light was not a weapon of superiority. It was a testament to endurance, held together by stubborn hands and borrowed time. Enemy fire lanced past him, scorching vacuum into light. One beam clipped the aft hull, tearing away armor and exposing raw structure beneath. The ship lurched, throwing Ward against the restraints, but he corrected course without hesitation. Pain flared along his ribs, distant and unimportant. What mattered was distance, timing, and the fragile window he needed to open. He remembered Earth not as a battlefield, but as quiet moments stolen between alarms. Morning light over cities that believed themselves safe. Children who watched evacuation ships rise, unaware of how close extinction had come. Those memories anchored him now, sharper than any targeting reticle. He was not fighting for victory, but for the chance that those moments could exist again. The Helior fleet tightened its encirclement, confident that numbers alone would end the encounter. Ward watched their formation with a strategist's eye, recognizing the flaw born from arrogance. They closed in uniformly, compressing space, never considering that a single human ship might be designed to exploit proximity rather than avoid it. He armed the secondary system, fingers steady despite the tremor spreading through the console. As the charge began to spool, gravity readings spiked unpredictably. The ship groaned, metal protesting forces it was never meant to channel. Ward opened the channel one last time, not to taunt but to explain, because humans had always believed understanding mattered, even at the end. He spoke of sacrifice as a language his species understood fluently, of standing alone so others would not have to. Weapons fire struck again, shattering the canopy's outer layer. Atmosphere bled away in a violent rush, emergency seals slamming down around him. Ward's breath fogged his visor as systems failed in rapid succession. Still, the charge continued to build, fed by the collapsing heart of the ship and by a decision already beyond reversal. In the war chamber, sensors flared red as space itself began to distort. Helior commanders shouted orders that arrived too late, their certainty unraveling into disbelief. Ward felt the moment arrive like calm after a storm, a strange peace settling over him as he released the final lock. His last thought was not of death but of distance, of the seconds his action would buy. The last light vanished into a collapsing knot of gravity, dragging nearby ships screaming into its wake. The explosion was silent, vast, and consuming, erasing the lone human vessel from existence. In its absence, the battlefield hung suspended, broken and stunned. For the first time, the Helior fleet did not advance. It hesitated, and in that hesitation, the future shifted. Across the void, human signals flickered back to life, distant but undeniable, slipping through the chaos Ward had created. The Helior crew sensed it before confirmation arrived, a pressure of inevitability replacing confidence. The sacrifice had carved time from annihilation, and time was humanity's most dangerous weapon. As damaged alien ships drifted, Waiting, the silence stretched, heavy with the knowledge that Earth was no longer retreating. Somewhere beyond sensors, engines gathered strength. Unseen, patient, relentless, united, returning now together. The silence that followed the detonation was almost sacred. In the aftermath of the last light's disappearance, the Helior fleet drifted like fragments of arrogance shattered, against the weight of something it had never understood. Where there had been precision and dominance, now there was confusion, systems failing, sensors flickering, voices overlapping in disbelief. Among them, Commander Vraxil stood motionless before the main projection, staring at the void that had swallowed both human and Helior alike. The spot on the display where the lone Terran vessel had vanished still pulsed with unstable gravity echoes, distorting everything near it. For the first time in his long military career, he could not make sense of the data before him. He had seen rebellion before, countless species rising only to fall in predictable defiance. But this was different. Humanity had retreated, not broken, regrouped, not surrendered. And now, the faint signals appearing at the edge of the system made his armor feel heavier, the air thinner. New human ships were emerging from hyperspace, not scattered and desperate like before, but in coordinated phalanxes, formations disciplined and deliberate, forged in loss and resolve. Vraxil's subordinates looked to him for command, but the words refused to come. He saw in their eyes the same creeping realization. What had been dismissed as a dying gasp was in truth the first breath of something reborn. The humans were not chasing victory. They were claiming the right to exist. Across the darkness, the Terran fleet expanded like the return of a storm. Their hulls bore scars, yet they moved as one. Communication relays reactivated. Medical beacons pulsed to rescue survivors, and in the center of it all, a new signal replaced the one that had vanished. A single emblem spread through every human channel, a skull framed by a star. It was the mark of Reaper 1. Ward's call sign had become their rallying cry. The Helior fleet opened fire in reflex, trying to reassert order through destruction, but humanity had adapted. Every maneuver from the alien playbook met an answer. Each weapon met a countermeasure. The humans did not fight with desperation now. They fought with memory. Ward's sacrifice had given them both time and focus, and they wielded it like a blade sharpened by grief. As the battle unfolded, Vraxil watched his empire unravel in patterns of light and ruin. He ordered retreats, but communication collapsed under the strain of interference. One by one, sectors went dark. The Helior commanders who had laughed with him only hours ago fell silent, their signals extinguished by the relentless advance of human warships. And amid the chaos, fragments of Ward's final transmission resurfaced through open frequencies, rebroadcast by human fleets and alien resistance cells alike. "This isn't about me," the voice said again, faint but unwavering. It never was. Vraxil clenched his claws as if the words had been spoken to him personally. The war he had believed already, one was transforming into something his empire had no doctrine for. It was not conquest, it was reckoning. Humanity did not seek annihilation of their enemy. They sought liberation of every world the Helior had chained. On one such world, beneath an alien sky lit by distant explosions, prisoners gathered around flickering monitors, showing the impossible, the fall of their oppressors. A child pointed to the symbol glowing faintly on the screen, tracing the shape of the skull and star. To them it did not mean death. It meant that someone somewhere had refused to run. In the war chamber, alarms screamed as Terran dreadnoughts breached the perimeter defense grid. The Helior command could have fled, but pride rooted them in place even as their walls shook. Vraxil stood before the collapsing hologram of the battlefield and whispered the name that now haunted every Imperial frequency, Reaper 1. The word felt heavy in his mouth, a name that belonged less to a man and more to an idea, one that refused to die. Moments later, Earth forces transmitted a universal message on all channels, a message both warning and promise. "We are humanity," the voice declared. "We fight not for vengeance but for those who cannot. Every world you took we will free. Every life you silenced we will remember." The Helior officers fell quiet, the futility of their empire made visible in the brilliance of Terran firepower and resolve. The battle did not end in annihilation but in surrender. Ships powered down, weapons fell silent. And amid the silence, the story of Elias Ward became more than a tale of sacrifice, it became a creed. Weeks later, The galaxy learned the cost of arrogance and the measure of human endurance. Ward's name echoed through liberated systems, carried by beings who had never known Earth but now owed it gratitude. In every memorial transmission, his words were repeated like scripture. Retreat is not surrender. Sometimes it's the path to return. On Earth, a monument was built, not of marble or triumph, but of the last light's recovered hull fragment, scorched and silent, standing beneath an open sky. Pilots saluted it before leaving orbit. Engineers touched it before launches, and children asked about the man who had stayed behind. They were told not of death but of duty, not of defeat but of choice. In distant reaches where the stars still burned cold and cruel, rumors spread of a voice that returned in the static of deep space signals. Some said it was only a ghost in the machine. Others swore they heard the same calm tone that had once silenced an empire. Either way, when Terran ships entered those sectors, Helior patrols no longer mocked. They simply cleared a path and listened, because the galaxy had learned what laughter costs when directed at humanity's resolve. They had learned that retreat was not the end, but the inhale before defiance. And in every quiet moment that followed, every commander, every soldier, and every survivor remembered the same truth, that courage often begins with the sound of one man's voice refusing to yield, and ends with a universe that will never forget his name.